I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds. You're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I
mean, we are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Joining me this week, I have our fearless editor for Hail Varsity, Brandon Vogel. Brandon, how are you?
Doing well. Fearless might not be the right word. I'm afraid of plenty of things, but I appreciate the vote of confidence.
You are not afraid of failure.
No, definitely not that. Remember those days?
Those were simpler times.
Simpler times. Orlando times.
But those were the dark days because we did not have a college football video game. And we found out this week that we, maybe not soon, but we will have a college football video game again. EA Sports is making, and it's hilarious, it's not going to be NCAA football, it's going to be college football. I would love to see them just scrub NCAA from like every square inch of the game and just completely leave the NCAA out of it. Maybe it's like a middle finger to them, or maybe it's the NCAA giving a middle finger to EA because they don't like the fact that the game is pushing forward. Either way, consumers are getting a college football game again. Brandon, did you play the old ones? Did you play like really play? Like not like, yeah, I would turn it on every once in a while. Like, did you really sit down and like invest time in building out and fleshing out a dynasty mode? And like some of the best ones were like 06 with Desmond Howard on the cover. 14 was really good. 14 was the last one. Did you play these games?
Definitely. I guess first of all, I viewed the name change as more of a stunning rebuke of where they think the NCAA's place is in college football going forward. And that totally. Yeah, we don't need the NCAA. It's just it's always been somewhat irrelevant, but how it had an inordinate amount of influence on the sport that it holds no sanctioned championship for. Really doesn't do anything for the sport besides take a chunk of the money and enforce the rules. Baby. Yeah. So I kind of took that as there's been Power 5 conferences that have been out there that have explored the autonomy route. I was just like, EA Sports is like, yeah, that's where this is headed. So we're not even going to bother with that, which was me reading too much into that. But yes,
no, I felt the same way, because if you looked at the press release that EA sent out, it was kind of like some of the comments in that press release were kind of like a wink at we don't know if the Power 5 powers that be or the college football playoff is even going to be associated with the NCAA in a couple years.
Right. And honestly, if that were to happen, if the Power 5 conferences were to split off and we're just our own thing now, strictly in terms of gaming, and remind me, because we need to circle back to this as we talk about this game a little bit to kick things off. I think it would they would be fine with it because they're we've got all the big teams. We've got the top 65 teams, 66 teams, and that's great. And we'll just go forward that way because they're interested in making money and we're interested in making money, and that's the way it's going to work. But to go back to your original question, yes, I have played about maybe every iteration of the college football game. So I am old enough. I was still young then, but definitely played Bill Walsh college football where they didn't have a license. The gameplay sucked, but it was college football. So you did what you had to do. And that meant playing as towns instead of schools since they didn't have rights to the logos. But once the EA franchise got up and running, that was Christmas in July for me. My brother and I would be talking back and forth. Oh, did you see the new screenshots? Did you see it? And very little in this game changed year to year. They're oh yeah, there's a new recruiting, but we tweaked recruiting a little bit and we added some more crowd shots. And we're yes, this is amazing. Oh, it's going to be so, but I mean, it was the same game every year, but
the EA specialty.
Yep. I would go get it back when you had to go to GameStop to make this trendy and topical. When you had to go to GameStop to get a physical copy of the game, I would go get it at midnight, place my pre-order, go pick it up, and then stay up for 8 hours playing it in the middle of July. And every year, like I was a little bit torn about this announcement. My heart was very happy. My brain, the adult part of my existence was like, man, I was really kind of like phasing out. I was aging out of video games and had done pretty well with that. And a lot of that was due to there not being a college football game, because that was the game that I played every year, no matter what. And now I'm going to have to get back in.
Who would you put on if the game's not coming out this year, but if it did, whoever graced the cover of the game would be the guy that would be somebody from the 2020 season. Would you put the Heisman Trophy winner on the cover, or would you put somebody else on the cover?
I mean, traditionally it's been the Heisman Trophy winner. I'm not deep enough in my 2021 research yet to be like, oh, this guy's going to be absolutely massive in 2021.
Well, to be fair, EA doesn't do that either. I mean, they put Peyton Hillis on the cover of a Madden game.
That's true. There's a little bit of, and so it used to be like you had to get a guy who was off to the NFL for a game that was about the season ahead, but was named for a season after that. So NCAA 14 was like current for the 2013 rosters, right?
Yep.
I'm not screwing. Yeah.
Yeah. It came out in 2013.
Yeah. So it was always this weird thing. Now, theoretically, if we get name, image, likeness, which it's sort of amusing post EA's announcement to see some people frame, like there's been news about name, image, likeness happening, legitimate news, an issue a lot of people are divided on, but a lot of people feel passionately about because it relates specifically to student athlete rights, which has been an issue since the NCAA has existed. It's not a new thing, but it's just kind of gained enough momentum. And now one specific tweet that I saw was about, yes, this means that the EA Sports game could go ahead with real rosters sooner rather than later. It's like, oh, great. So the entire like philosophical debate about name, image, likeness, do the players have a right towards this, is now just about, can we get the game?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I mean, that conversation started like the second NIL legislation kind of came to the forefront, like immediately upon states being like, yeah, we're going to adopt this legislation in our own state. Nebraska was one of the first. Everybody was like, does this mean we're getting the game back? Does this mean the game is coming back? And it's like, okay, there are more important things at play than a video game, but in a roundabout way, sure, yeah, we might get the game back. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. So I was listening to an off-network podcast, which you should never do, but occasionally I just have to. But Split Zone Duo from guys who used to be at Banner Society when Banner Society was still around. I mean, it's still around, but
RIP.
Unfortunately, they had to reduce staff. But alumni and current members of that, and they were talking about, so what EA Sports used to do and what gets it ahead in the game here now is you go to the collegiate licensing, I don't know if it's company or corporation, but the CLC, which has a host of schools in their portfolio. You sign an agreement with them, and it's basically a revenue share, and you get, say, 80 out of the 130 schools you want. And then there's still some schools, Georgia's a big one, that aren't in the CLC, so you'd have to negotiate your rights with them eventually. And it was a really interesting discussion because they were talking about, like, if you're Kirby Smart in Georgia, do you want to be out on the recruiting trail saying, to recruits, which we know like recruiting can get pretty dumb and be focused on very minute details. But this one felt pretty real of saying like, yeah, if you come here instead of Alabama or Florida or Clemson, because those are the schools they're recruiting against, Ohio State, you can't be in the game because we haven't signed an agreement with EA Sports yet. And I mean, that's kind of real. I mean, how many schools did you see tweet about this in the aftermath of that EA Sports announcement?
I could totally see Nick Saban putting that in his recruiting pitch. What was it, like 8 national titles in the last 9 years, or like played in 8 games in the last 9 years? And oh, by the way, we can put you in a college football video game and Georgia can't. Just add that line to the end.
I mean, you realistically probably should, and that's for the best resume in college football. That's for the guy who can sell everything else, who can sell real world results. And oh, by the way, if you're the kind of guy who's most interested as a 17-year-old, which very well might be the case about the virtual world, yeah, we've got that. We've got that too. Here's my question for you as somebody who played the game.
Okay.
How did you choose your team?
Oh, I was going to ask you this question. I would go through phases, right? So like when this game came out, or when the last game came out, 2013, so I would have been 18. So like I was sort of at the tail end of really being like really, really invested in Florida Gators football. So with the new game, and hopefully this doesn't get people mad at me, at least I'm not saying like I'm an Oklahoma fan or whatever, which a lot of people think I am, but I'm kind of not. When the new game would come out, especially in, I think 13 had Tebow on the cover. No, 13 had Robert Griffin on
Denard Robinson, wasn't it?
He was on 14.
Oh, okay. 13.
And I know that because I still have the game, and it is literally the only game that I have for an Xbox 360 that was purchased because I had the game but did not have the console. I think this was actually 2 years ago, because the old Xbox 360 that I had broke. And so for my birthday gift one year, like I got a used Xbox 360 game console from GameStop. It's the only game that I have for it. Anyway, your question. I would start with Florida, and I would play with Florida. My dad played this game all the time. My dad's not a big gamer, but like even 14, he played all the time. He would like steal our console out of my bedroom and put it in the living room so that he could play this game. He would play with Nebraska, obviously. And so there would be times where I'd be like, okay, I'll play with Nebraska. I picked obscure after I got through a dynasty with Florida. The next one that I would start up, I would kind of like go back and forth. I would pick either obscure teams in non-Power 5 conferences and say, can I get like Nevada? Like Nevada was one team I played with and did like a 13-year dynasty with. It's like, can I get Nevada to like, we're playing for a national championship every single year. I'm getting like top 2 recruiting classes every single year. I would do that. Or it would be who has the coolest uniforms.
Yeah, uniforms was a big thing, particularly when they started adding alternates. It was like, can I not have to wear one of 2 uniforms every game? If so, move to the top of the list. Then I would move to like, is the stadium cool? Is the view I'm going to see 7 or 8 times a year fun and interesting? So that was good for schools like Wyoming. Probably played a dynasty or 2 with Boise State, and then you realize that practically speaking, the blue turf kind of sucked from a video game perspective.
Yes, it did.
But yeah, and I feel like that's what most people did, was like, oh, I'm going to go take New Mexico State to the upper echelon of college football, which you could always do. Like it was like, yeah, I mean, depending on what level you played at, it was like a 2-year process. But by the end of year 2, you'd be like, yeah, we're finishing in the top 10. We're recruiting way above a level that New Mexico State could ever possibly recruit at. And you would just do it. And it was fun. And it never changed. It was basically the same every year.
Yep.
Like we were talking about cosmetic differences of like, oh, this is cool new feature. This is a cool new feature. And then once you played it for 30 hours over the first like 72 hours that you owned it, like all those features just fell by the wayside, and it became like, well, I'm just going to keep doing this because it's what I do. And I enjoy it.
The same game with slightly updated rosters, even though not really, because it was always like number sign and then number. But updated playbooks as well. That was one of the things, like when I was looking back through like what would be stuff that you would have to add to the new game. And I was kind of going through my list, and I'm curious what you thought of the list that I had in the story that we put on HailVarsity.com. I was going through the list and I got to playbooks and I was thinking about it. And I was like, they had read option stuff. I didn't have RPO stuff. That didn't come around until like Madden 19 or something like that. So that would obviously be included. But like your ability to have a wide ranging playbook and then your ability to like edit that playbook and add whatever you wanted to that playbook was like really kind of ahead of the game. Like it was really ahead of its time in certain respects. And like the playbook thing was like honestly one of the best parts of the game.
It definitely was. And that's like, for me, a tip of the cap to the EA Sports staff and how much care they took with that part of it. So NCAA Football 14 is the only game I still own on PS2, and I don't have a console for it. I guess I should have sold that before this announcement. If anybody wants to make an offer for that game and still wants it for the next 2 years or however long it takes us to get the new version, I'm accepting offers now. I understand I've missed my window.
Well, maybe not, because I got a text from my brother the morning that was announced. And was like, hey, can you bring the NCAA Football 14 game home so that I can play it? And I was like, are you going to pay me for it? So maybe you might still be able to get money out of it.
Well, if he's interested in PlayStation version, tell him to reach out because I've got it. But like there was, I can't remember. It was probably 2 or 3 summers ago for whatever reason. Like I broke that back out. Like I've done that occasionally. It's never been a game that I like kept playing, but occasionally I'd break it out. And that Oregon playbook, so Frost era Oregon, was so much fun. And there were some stupid plays in there. You're just like, this never works, but it looks so cool that I'm going to keep trying to do it. But there was a lot in there that did work. And like the AI, I mean, it was not a little, it was super oversimplified, but like they'd highlight like, okay, on this play, you're running midline veer. You're going to read the defensive tackle here. And they would highlight it. And they probably made it too easy, but you'd read that guy and the play would function mostly like it's supposed to function in real life. I guess that'll be an interesting thing for the new game is because back then you could be like, okay, Oregon's running this stuff. And, some of it filters out to other playbooks, but like Oregon had it all. So a lot of times, no matter what dynasty team I was playing with, I'd be like, well, we're running the Oregon playbook.
Yeah.
Now, that's like the de facto playbook for all of college football. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays in because the, I guess, offensive innovation for college football has kind of it's smoothed out a little bit. Like, I mean, when Alabama's running this stuff, Alabama's running this stuff. So everybody's running it. It used to be a thing that leveled the playing field. Now the team that has the most unlevel playing field is doing it too, to remarkable results.
Yeah. One thing that I would like to see in a new game. Let me pull up my list again. Would you like to see a transfer portal in the game? Like a real one, like a full-fledged transfer portal that is like active and not like gimmicky.
Yeah, I think you probably have to. It's such a part of college football now that it would be interesting if they could build some dynamism, make it dynamic to a degree into that. Whereas, so like you go to Colorado State and make them a perennial top 5 team. Like at that point, you're probably mostly losing guys. Like you shouldn't be able to add guys easily from that. But if you're a middle of the road team, if you're at Colorado State 2 years prior where you're trying to build things up, like maybe you should really be able to get ahead through the transfer portal. It'd be interesting. Like so much of the real life strategy with using the transfer portal is still in development that it'll be kind of interesting. But maybe with another year or 2 down the road, we'll have a better idea of like, okay, there's some teams that are just really good at this.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you four options for new features in the game. You have to pick 2 of them that are going to go into the game and 2 of them you think are trash. Okay. Option 1 is you have an expanded catalog of broadcasters for the games that you play. So you have like the top line ESPN crew that would be assigned for night games. That would be like Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler. You also have a secondary ESPN crew that would be for day games. I don't know, like they have a huge catalog of people. So like maybe like Todd Blackledge or something like that. And then you have the CBS top line crew, Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson for CBS games, and a Fox option of Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt. So that's option one, a diversified commentary team. Option two is you have the ability to cheat in recruiting. You have the ability to, if you want to lure a top prospect to, let's say, New Mexico State, you can cheat. And there are various options to quote unquote cheat that are built into the game. But those options come with varying degrees of risks of getting caught by the NCAA. And if you get quote unquote caught by the NCAA or whatever the governing body is, then there are penalties, sanctions, loss of scholarships, you get a bowl ban or something, depending on the severity of the crime. That's option two. Option three is the ability to fully control your assistant coaching staff. You can hire and fire your offensive coordinator, your defensive coordinator. I don't think that was like a thing that you could do in the previous game. There was a coaching carousel in the last game, but it was largely performative. You couldn't really do anything with it except for hiring head coaches. I think. I could be wrong there. And then let's see. Option four is mascot mode is back in the game.
Okay. 4 is definitely out for me. I never cared about mascot mode and never used it once. Yep.
Are you joking right now? You never did the like aerial like side flips with Herbie Husker?
Nope. Never. That was one of those, they showed screenshots of that and I was like, nah, couldn't be me.
Okay.
I'm also going to eliminate number 3, control assistance.
Okay.
That was like, it was a minimal part of the game, if I remember correctly, in that like you went through the coaching carousel and like if your OC got hired away, you had to go fight another one, but it had like no impact on the game itself. Yeah. It'd be interesting if it had impact of being of like you picked a bad OC and now your offense isn't as good. But still, I'm eliminating that one. So the catalog of broadcasters is really interesting. That's pretty aesthetic difference, but I like it. I don't know. You'd have to sign rights deals with all of the various networks to get them involved, which might be a breaking point. But having a Gus Johnson option would be fun. A more esoteric option for me as somebody who grew up in the Panhandle of Nebraska, whose high school football coach played at Rushville High School and backed up former Seattle Seahawks quarterback Kelly Stauffer, who does games for ESPN, but like the Sun Belt game at noon. No disrespect whatsoever. I'm just saying that's kind of where I see him. I have a personal attachment. Like I would definitely over the course of playing hundreds and hundreds of games be like, yeah, I think Kelly Stauffer should call this game. So I would do that 100%. The cheat and recruiting thing is a ton of fun. Like it seems kind of, say you want to hire, although I guess in the name image likeness era, that's what it is. But say you want to sign a really highly touted quarterback from, say, Blinn College. Don't know, just totally selected at random. And you need to drop off the bag to get that. That would be pretty fun because in the course of video game, I mean, I know you just move on to the next season, but I'm just trying to think about my own experience. Like I would be really disappointed if it's like, well, we paid for the quarterback and he was really good, but now I get one less game. Like we're just going to go undefeated in the regular season and that's it. That would devastate me. So I think that should be in there. That would be really fun. A moral dilemma.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could take it a step further. You could have bagmen. You could have various like fast food restaurants that have agreed to partner with the game for morally ambiguous reasons. The thing with recruiting, like the recruiting system obviously has to be revamped, but the interesting part of like full control over your assistant coaches for me is I don't just want to have like the ability to hire and fire my OC. Like you said, I want them to have like varying skill sets or attributes assigned to them that make them either more beneficial to my operation or more harmful to my operation. And one of those things could be recruiting. Like you could have a guy that is like a Travis Fisher kind of recruiter who can just seal the deal where he goes. Or you could have a guy that is like, yeah, screw it. I'm going to break the rules. We're going to get everybody. I'm going to do it. And like you have that guy that like maybe you are more likely to sign a top 5 or a 5-star recruit at a podunk school, but because of his reputation, like maybe it boosts the likelihood that you get caught or something random like that. They could have some fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fun things you could do about it, because you could also get like the X's and O's guy, where it's like every play you run will be 6% more successful, but your recruiting is going to go down. Like he's not a good recruiter. He's not interested. He's not good at it. Like it would be fun if those decisions had real impact. I would probably argue for that over the choice of broadcaster.
And see, the thing with broadcasters is, yeah, it would probably be a little difficult to get like CBS, ESPN, and Fox all on board with, because you would also have to be able, I mean, like presumably if you have the voices of their broadcast packages, you would also have like aesthetically what those broadcast packages look like. And like the last iteration of the game that came out, it had ESPN graphics and logos and it had an ESPN similar like broadcast layout. Yeah. So like you would need that stuff, I think, in the game. But like you think about when EA was doing college basketball games as well, like 10 years ago, like I think the last one that I had was like Blake Griffin was on the cover. They had the ability to go, you could do an ESPN broadcast or you could do a CBS broadcast. Like that was in a game a decade ago. Give it back to us.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we're really getting into the weeds here, but like, this is what it was like. Like you cared so much about the smallest details, because theoretically, and I mean, this is going to change. Well, it may have already changed. I think the new deal may be signed, but like, okay, if you wanted to play on CBS, which basically means it's a 2:30 game. So you're going to be in blazing hot sun. Like that's going to be the vibe. That's going to be the feel. It's got to look like that. You got to go to the SEC, or you can go to Army, Navy and play on CBS once, or you can go to the Sun Bowl, which I think was still on CBS for a long time. Like, and it would be totally fun because it's like a different level of the game. You're like, well, I won 6 straight national titles at Florida, and then I went to Florida International and did it there. But you know what I haven't done yet? I haven't played on CBS. So I'm going to take over Vanderbilt, and I'm going to make the Commodores amazing. Such a great game.
Yeah. I mean, it was a great game. It was, and it without the, like, it looks terrible. Like, just calling a spade. When we have, like, consoles have jumped 2 generations since the last game came out. So, like, from a graphics standpoint, it looks terrible. Especially the players standing on the sideline that are not involved in a play. They look, it's hilarious how bad it looks. But from a gameplay standpoint and just from, like, a pure fun standpoint, and like you said, like, you get it, and then you spend, like, 30 of the next 72 hours just playing it nonstop. Like, it is still like that. You know, when you break the game out for a weekend, like, you sink your entire weekend into it and it's suddenly gone. The game has stood the test of time. And it's great to see.
So with the way gaming has changed, and like I alluded to, I'm not really up to that. Like I still play video games the way I played video games in like 2008. But and there were later years in there where my brother and I and a couple of friends would have the online dynasty, and that was fun, except for like, you always had that one guy where you're like, hey, could you play your game this week so we can advance this to the next stage? Yeah. Like, do you think that will change? Because college football for me was very much, And part of this is just like when I was playing it most frequently, like I was not living in a dorm room. I was not in high school. I played it by myself. Do you think the new era changes that? Do you think more people will play it online, kind of head to head than the solitary experience that it used to be?
Yeah, probably, just because online is and like gaming competition has expanded so much. Like esports is not taboo anymore, I don't think. So like probably, but like, I mean, I was the same as you. Like you had the ability to play with other people. It was like really rudimentary at that point, but like I have the ability to play games with other people now, and I don't do it. Like my gaming is like I'm gonna turn on Spider-Man, a game that I've beaten the story mode like 4 different times, and I'm just gonna like swing around the city by myself. Or I'm gonna turn on 2K and like play a my NBA mode or something like that by myself. So like I think there are still a lot of those people out there. So you'll probably get some like online competition elements to the game, but I think a lot of people will still kind of handle it the same way. Maybe that's idealistic thinking just based off of like my own experiences, but I don't know. Or I guess projecting would be a better way to describe it, but I don't know. We'll see. Should we talk about Nebraska? I guess since we've
let's talk about the team we'd never choose in Dynasty Mode. That's actually not true. I used to usually start out with Nebraska, but
they had cooler uniforms. If they had more uniform options, the reason I always picked Oregon is because I could play 12 games in a season and never wear the same uniform once or more than twice.
Yeah, it was nice. Although who knows by the time the new version comes out, Nebraska might be up to full-time black shirts alternate, both home and away, plus maybe one other. Who knows? Like
I did, however, when I was playing with Nebraska. Sorry, I know we need to move on. But when I would play Dynasty modes with Nebraska, I would wear red pants with the red tops. That was the thing that I would do.
That was always good. You could break that out for big games. Like for those teams where you had limited options, you'd be like, well, at least I can do this. I can do color on color. Yep. I can do all white on the road.
Yep.
For special occasions only.
Were you the person that played with all black shoes, regardless of what the uniform was?
I don't remember that I paid that much attention to shoes. Like I remember going in and changing all my recruits to be like, oh, this guy, like I feel good about this guy. He needs to have a single digit. But
yes, defensive lineman with single digit numbers. Okay, one more thing. This just made me think of it. You couldn't have double numbers on offense and defense. You could only have one number on the entire team. It wasn't like it is now. If and when there is a new game, we have to have the ability to give the same number to a guy on offense and on defense. I need that so I can have 2 number ones on my team.
Okay.
Single digit numbers on college football players or just football players in general look great. And as games currently stand, you can only give 9 of them out. I need more.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go along with that. I don't feel as strongly about it as you do. With only 9 available to hand out in the video world, it made it even more. You had to really feel good about your 5-star defensive end you got, which, man, Nebraska, well, every team, but Nebraska could use a 5-star defensive end. But anyway,
5-star guy to just rush the passer. Yeah, probably. We are recording this on a Thursday afternoon. Just a little bit ago, Scott Frost spoke to the media as part of a kind of a National Signing Day press conference, also like a what are we doing in the offseason kind of update deal. Brandon, you listened to the comments from Frost. It was about a 26 minute conversation with the head coach. Was there anything immediately that kind of struck you or stood out to you that you want to talk about off the cuff?
There wasn't a ton. It was sort of strange because like most teams that aren't changing coaches, Nebraska really had one addition for this quote unquote late signing period. And that was like the opening question. It was kind of like, well, this is technically why we're here. So we'll handle that. And that was all fine and good. And then we kind of got into, questions about the offseason, question about some open, not even coaching positions, but staff positions. Like, I don't know. It felt for the most part like about what you'd expect him to say on a lot of fronts. The quarterback stuff was kind of interesting. Got a question in there about Logan Smothers, which obviously, given offseason, the transfer of Luke McCaffrey takes on a little bit more weight. But yeah, for the most part, it felt by the book. I guess, like, if we really want to get deep in the weeds here, Frost continues to be like, I feel good about this. Like, I got to focus on the guys that want to be here, which, yes, like, these are things you can say every offseason. Like, is there a real kind of reason behind those things that's making that, I guess, more true than the last time we heard all of those things? And I don't know, like, it's a hard sort of thing to prove in a press conference anyway. But we didn't really kind of get down that path too far.
Yeah, there's some weird questions. One thing that, like, Greg Smith and I talked about after the fact was, like, he's kind of reaching a point where his cachet within the fan base is not what it was when he first got here. And so there aren't going to be too many press conferences where he doesn't say something that elicits the, like, stop talking and show us on the field response. Like, I feel like we're at a point where every single press conference is just going to have that kind of response in the, like, the comments section of the tweets of his quotes. I think we talked about this a little bit with, I think, Aaron and Greg on a podcast a couple weeks ago. I think he's kind of learning, so to speak, on the job, how to navigate press conferences and how to navigate, like, giving his players pub, talking about his players in a positive manner while also shielding them from maybe expectations that he doesn't feel are warranted. And, he's a young coach, so that's obviously something that you have to learn. It's a delicate balance, I think. But, like, Greg and I were talking specifically about the way that he talked about Omar Manning. And to me, I thought it sounded very, like, somewhat shielding, which was cool to see. It was like, yeah, this is a guy that we feel has a lot of potential. This is a guy that we're excited about what he can do for our offense. But this is also a guy that, like, look, like, we don't want to put unrealistic expectations on him. We don't want to put pressure on him. I think with Frost sort of, and maybe this is reading too much into what he said, but with Frost sort of not kind of going all the way in, like, yeah, Omar's a Sunday guy. He's an NFL guy. He's a guy that is going to make our offense so much better. Like, with him not going there and sort of saying, I want to keep expectations low. I don't want to put too much pressure on them. I think it was maybe somewhat of an acknowledgement that maybe at least he felt like he did that a year ago. And then Omar didn't play, and, they've kind of been intentionally vague about what's going on with that situation, which is fine. I mean, it's Omar's situation to share however much he wants to share. But Frost saying, like, we got to get him healthy, but when he's healthy and if he's part of the team, which, he's here, Frost said he's here, he came back, he's going to be part of the team moving forward. Like, if he's available to them on Saturdays, they're excited about what he can do. I wonder if the comments about the wide receiver talent are going to come back up in November. Those kind of, like, perked my ears up a little bit. I want to talk about the quarterbacks, though. It's kind of the main thing that I want to hit on. It sort of seemed like they're hesitant to go to the portal for a quarterback. Frost said, like, we need to find the right guy. We need to find guys that want to be here, right? And you and I have sort of been digging around in the transfer portal a lot over the last, week or two. And one of the things that I've seen is when you get those highly recruited guys, those highly rated guys coming out of high school that are in the transfer portal, it's a higher than you'd expect probability that those guys are not just going to be like a one-time transfer. There are guys that like they bounce around a couple places before they really find a home. And, I wonder if some of their hesitancy to go to the portal is they just want to know what they have with this quarterback room. Do you think that ultimately they will dip their toes into the portal after we get through spring ball? Or do you kind of take Frost at his word that he thinks highly of Logan Smothers, he's excited about Heinrich, and they're kind of gonna try to roll with what they have?
Yeah, I sort of thought this before even today, because I was asked about it on a radio show. I think it was the week prior. Do we expect Nebraska to go in the portal for a quarterback? And it's kind of tough because, like, what do you even look for eligibility wise? Like, if there's a can't miss guy, if there's a Jalen Hurts out there, obviously you probably throw your hat in the ring and see what you can do. But minus that, like, are you looking for a guy who's proven over multiple seasons, which, okay, then why is that guy in the transfer portal in the first place? Like, we all understood why Jalen Hurts was, but he was kind of an anomaly. Who's definitively better than Adrian right now? And if so, and you bring that guy in, does that mean you just like traded quarterbacks essentially because Martinez potentially leaves? Are you looking for somebody who slots in eligibility wise with where Luke sort of was? So a little bit of an insurance policy in case Smothers is not ready. But I think probably similar to you, everything I've heard about how the staff feels about Smothers has been pretty glowing. And it's not much. But I think for a true freshman, he came in, I mean, Frost said as much today. So assign whatever weight to that you want, but said, I feel better about it now than I did when he signed. Paraphrasing that, obviously. But like, if that's true, like, I think you can kind of roll with that. So it's just, I don't know what the perfect sort of transfer quarterback for them would be. And for that reason, I would be pretty surprised even if we get through spring ball, minus additional attrition. That would obviously change the math, but I'd be surprised if there's a guy in there that felt like, oh, this definitely improves the room and this gives us more depth and checks all the boxes that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Among the guys that are in the portal right now that aren't committed to another school, there aren't many options like that make a lot of sense for Nebraska. And there's not a clear cut, this guy, there's not like a Jamie Newman in there, right? Like that Georgia like looks at him from Wake Forest is like, oh, well, it's a no-brainer that we can get this guy, even though we just got JT Daniels. Like, sure, let's get Jamie Newman. There's not a Joe Burrow. Like the only guy sort of, I think I went through the top 15 or 20 quarterbacks that are in the portal just off 247 ratings. And there's only one of them that had a Nebraska connection when he was going through the recruiting process. And that's Kentucky's Terry Wilson, which would be hilarious turn of events. It seems like they are not to say comfortable with their quarterback room. I don't know if you can ever really be comfortable with the quarterback room in this day and age with the transfer portal, but it seems like they, at the very least, don't know what they have with that room and would like to see what they have with that room before they make any moves. And Frost's comment about like, we want, you got to find the right guy. It's got to be the right guy. He said he doesn't want to act too quick and make a mistake. And he said that they talked about it. They thought about adding a guy quickly before spring ball, presumably. Obviously I guess I can't say obviously, there's still time. It seems like they have decided to not go that route at the current moment. And like, for me personally, there are some parallels here to the running back room. I want to see what Marvin Scott is. Like, I want to see what Savion Morrison is. I want to see what Ramir Johnson has to his game, what Ronald Tompkins can be. If Marquise Stepp comes in and takes the running back spot and runs with it, and Nebraska's better for it, fine. But if Marquise Stepp comes in, I'm not saying this is going to happen, I'm just saying as a hypothetical. If he comes in and, suddenly you lose one or two of the running backs that you have recruited, that you've been investing time in and developing, are you really helped in that situation? I don't know. And so when you kind of compare that to the quarterback room, like you said, if you bring a guy in that you want to contend with Adrian for the starting job, because any quarterback worth his salt that's going to come to Nebraska as a transfer is going to want to play. That's why they're in the portal in the first place. So if you bring a guy in that's going to contend with Adrian, you run the risk of losing Adrian, or you run the risk of losing a guy like Logan. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. And, you're still in a situation where you don't feel great about the depth. How different to you, Brandon, is this quarterback room as it stands right now with Adrian and then the two freshman guys that don't have any experience? How similar or how different is this to you from the quarterback situation a year ago?
Well, you've got one fewer option. I guess the way I would look at that is Nebraska's quarterback room entering 2020 was largely an anomaly in that you had it, and this is, probably a function of still being relatively early in a coach's tenure, but you had it spaced out perfectly, right? Like you had a guy that you'd signed in every class and they were still here. And that's just not really the way that quarterback recruiting works anymore. And so it's tough. I don't want to be too harsh on a small sample size of Luke McCaffrey, but like we saw his playmaking ability. We saw, like, everyone sees his athleticism and that he is a good football player. Like it's hard to see him you find yourself in a closer than expected Purdue game against Purdue in mid-November on the road. It's cold and crappy out, like piloting Nebraska to the game-winning drive. And to be fair, like he had very little, opportunity to showcase this at that point. I'm not saying like I was writing the book on him, but like based on what we heard about Smothers and based on the fact that this is mostly what college football is. Like, so if everything had gone perfectly, like just based on timing, Adrian Martinez would have played here as long as he wanted to play and been great. And then Luke McCaffrey would have had to essentially wait 3 years, take whatever playing time he could get, and then step in. How often does that happen? I mean, really, you're probably, I would guess, and I haven't done any research on this, but I would just guess that the primary sort of quarterback rotation / trajectory is closer to where Nebraska's at now, in that you've got your guy and you've got the next guy, and hopefully you can hang on to the next guy and develop him so he's ready to go when the guy is no longer part of your program.
Well, let me tell you where that happens. That happens at Alabama, where you have a Mac Jones who knows that he's going to sit behind Tua Tagovailoa. I think that's the Solid Verbal podcast, the way that they do it. I love it. And I say it like that every single time. They're winning and they're playing for SEC titles and national championships. And so you are a little bit more content to sit and wait. And you know that the guy ahead of you is performing at an elite level. And so, you can't really make any bones about it. They're going to put you in the league if you play well for a couple of years. And so you can sit and wait. And like, if Nebraska was winning, they could probably operate the way that they've been operating with quarterbacks for the last 3 years, but Nebraska's not winning. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like the example that might be closer to Nebraska, and that's the only one I can think of, which makes me think that it's even more of an outlier. Because you're right, like being the backup quarterback at Alabama ain't that bad when, hey, we kill everybody for the most part. So you're going to get to play a little bit. We're also probably going to win an SEC title 3 out of every 4 years and a national title once every 2 years. So it's not a bad gig to be in the backup quarterback there. But Mike Leach's Texas Tech would be the other one. And I think that one was solely like, I think that's largely gone in today's game. But with the uniqueness of the offense that they ran, and if you're a quarterback in particular, just knowing, oh, you're going to come here and whether you want to or not, you're going to throw for over 5,000 yards. Like that's just what the offense requires. And you just like went through the list, and I forget the order at this point, but Cliff Kingsbury, Cumbie, et cetera, et cetera. Like it didn't matter who Texas Tech put in there. The dude was just going to throw for a ton of yards. And as the offense continued to get more and more refined, like the next guy up would break the previous guy's record. And it was really had nothing to do with like talent. It was just kind of like, yeah, we just get better at running this a little bit each year and we put up more yards. But those are kind of the two examples. Like for the most part, you're either really active in the QB transfer portal, which Oklahoma's kind of the paragon of success with that over recent history, or like you recruit a guy each year, you're probably more realistically looking like at a 2-year space out. So you've got your guy and the next guy up's 2 years behind, because that at least feels like, oh, I'm not going to waste 3 years of my career. I'm only going to waste maybe 2, not waste, but like spend 2 years. So it gets tough. Like I feel like Nebraska in terms of quarterbacks was kind of in a luxurious position previously, and now it's back to where everybody else is at. It had to move out of the nice house. It had some bad investments, didn't go quite right. Nobody's fault, just the way the market broke, and had to move to a slightly smaller house in the suburbs.
Do you expect Logan Smothers, or I guess Heinrich, I don't think you can totally write Heinrich out of the equation, because I think both of those two guys, I've framed it this way, and people are welcome to disagree with me, but this is the way that I see it. Like the first 2 quarterbacks they recruited, Adrian Martinez and Luke McCaffrey, were runners who could throw the ball, and the last 2 guys, Smothers and Harburg, feel like throwers who can run the ball. So I don't think either of those guys can be completely like pushed to the side for the quarterback conversation this year, because they got to be better throwing the ball. That being said, do you think that either of them can realistically push Martinez for the starting job after what we saw in those last 4 games for 2020?
I think Smothers could. I think it's still a big ask for an early enrollee in Harburg, who, this sounds insane, but as somebody who played high school football at the level that he played it at, I understand kind of what he saw in a week-to-week basis, and like the jump to college is always going to be huge. It is even a little bit bigger for smaller school guys.
Totally
so I think
going to be an adjustment period. Yeah.
Yep, I think that's part of it too. But could Smothers in particular challenge? Yes, I think he could, because some of this goes back to a conversation I remember us having in the off season about, okay, well, is there really a QB competition going on between Martinez and McCaffrey? And I was like, my point of view was that, is the bar really that high coming off of Adrian Martinez's 2019? And I think it's still, in a large part, he played really well over those last 4 games. And that's good. That's what Nebraska needs. Nebraska is better off if he just wins this job, presumably, unless you've just got a phenom behind him, which we don't know at this point. But in terms of somebody like that overtaking him, like if you are an excellent decision maker, if you've got a little bit more arm talent, if you're a guy who's just like, yeah, he's the only person on our roster who can make that throw, that helps. And then the running piece of it, I don't know. I feel like I know the least about Smothers as a runner. I know he's super fast, which is good. And I know that Nebraska probably needs to rely on the QB run less than it has so far to this point under Frost. So really the question there becomes, and this is probably oversimplified, but I don't know how much, like when you do scramble or when you do design quarterback runs, can you hold on to the football? Because at this point, like Adrian's fumble numbers are just like, you got to figure out, are you willing to live with it? And if you've got a guy who's like, he doesn't do that in practice, that gets you pretty close right there. Like if you're just like, if you see it a little bit better, if you get through the progressions and make good choices, and I'm not implying that Adrian doesn't do this stuff, it just hasn't been at the consistency level we would have thought based on his stellar freshman year. Yeah, that race can get close pretty quickly, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think the turnovers are the big differentiator. And like we don't see practice, so this is an educated guess. I don't think fumbles are as big an issue in practice as they are in the games. And I think that because the quarterbacks aren't getting hit.
Yeah.
I think we're 3 years in and the quarterbacks don't get hit in practice. And I completely understand why. You don't want guys getting their heads taken off in practice and then you lose your quarterback, especially considering the depth situation that they've been in at quarterback over the first 3 years. I completely understand it. But at the same time, I think that plays a factor in the fumbles. I don't think they know how to get hit and how to hang on the ball when they do get hit and how to fall while being hit. And when you're not practicing it, it's hard to know how to do those things. So yeah, I think the turnovers are going to be a big differentiating factor. Like Luke last year had 1 touchdown pass and 6 interceptions in his pass attempts. And somebody looked it up on Twitter. I don't remember the person, but they used the play index on sportsreference.com. And Luke was one of only 33 quarterbacks in college football since the turn of the century to have 6 interceptions or more on fewer than 80 pass attempts. And I looked at the list, and he was one of only 13 Power 5 quarterbacks to do that. So, like, you can't operate that way. And we've seen Frost talk about the turnover numbers. The turnover margin has to be better. They had 18 turnovers as an offense last year. Like, yeah, the defense has to produce some more takeaways and some more splash plays, but they got you 7 in 8 games, and you were minus 11 in the turnover margin in 8 games. Like, you got to figure out the turnover stuff. And so, like, to your point, if Logan in practice is just bombing deep throws left and right and like putting them like on the money, like he looks like those Texas Tech Patrick Mahomes teams, and he gives you the added element of when he runs, when he scrambles, he's a little bit more controlled. He's not going to fumble the ball. If you feel like that's where he's at, then he's got a chance. But I also like the way Adrian operated the offense in the last 4 games, kind of similar to you. I mean, he set a program record for completion percentage last year. Like he was under 60% as a sophomore, and everybody looked at that number and said, raise this, please, as a junior. And he did. He got it above 70%, which was a program record. And so, like, if they are the kind of offense that I think you would prefer them to be, or maybe not prefer, but like you think that they have a higher ceiling being, and I know Greg Smith feels the same. Like if they're a run first offense, if they're really good on the ground, then that kind of like efficient passing attack, not necessarily, throwing 50-yard bombs left and right, that can work. And so like, I still think Adrian is kind of in the driver's seat in that regard.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the past year was encouraging on the completion percentage front, knowing that this offense didn't go down the field a lot. It was fairly limited. It also kind of showed you that you'd probably be willing to live with, 2 or 3 percentage points less on the completion percentage if it got you more downfield shots. So, and that's okay. Like you learn something about where the offense is at as a whole. It's like, okay, so in terms of envisioning the offense, seeing the offense real time, like Adrian can pick out the guy that's going to be open. But we also need to add the downfield element of it. And like, just thinking about the fumbles in particular, and I don't have off the top of my head how many times he's fumbled, not even fumbles lost, but he's at about 13 carries a game, I'm guessing, just looking at the averages over the past 3 years. And that includes sacks, which you can also fumble on a sack. So in this case, it's fine. Like it's a high percentage of those carries. I'll go back and add it up at some point, and probably be even more alarmed. But just like, okay, if Adrian Martinez is carrying the football or getting sacked, like, what are the chances that you fumble? And then what are the chances that you lose them? And the chances that you lose them should be 50%, but Nebraska's been a little bit snake bit on that for quite a while now. So that's really the biggest thing. And you would need a pretty good data set. In a coach's case, a data set would be all of your practices, workouts, et cetera, to show like, oh yeah, Logan just doesn't do this, to kind of clear that hurdle. And I think get over the experience edge that he just has coming in. But you mentioned it. And I mean, I've looked at these numbers, but it still kind of shocks me every time it comes up. I'm like, 18 turnovers lost. So that doesn't even count like fumbles that you didn't lose, or passes that didn't get intercepted, but probably should have. 18 over 8 games. It's more than 2 a game. Like, so yeah, you could look at that of the defense really needs to force a lot more of these to help us make that up, or you need to figure out how to not average more than 2 giveaways per game. And that's really the big issue.
Teamrankings.com can tend to be a little hit or miss. Might be off by 1 or 2 with these I've found. And like sometimes the stat keeper, whether you're at home or on the road, won't log it as a fumble. Like there was a fumble in the Penn State game that Luke had where he lost it going out of bounds. I think everybody thought it was a fumble, but it wasn't logged as a fumble. So like I say this, there might be a little variance here. Adrian's played 28 games at Nebraska. He has 27 fumbles.
Okay. I'm doing the math here real quick. 375 carries, which includes sacks. So how many total fumbles, not even fumbles lost, but just fumbles, did you say?
27.
All right. So 7.2%. Yeah. Yeah. So 1 in every 7, basically 7 carries and sacks, the ball's going to come out.
And he runs it 13 times a game.
Yes.
And that's completely ignoring, he's got 20 interceptions against 31 touchdowns in his career. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the numbers get tough.
I mean, you could look at that and say that's why they're losing. And people would be like, okay, yeah, makes sense.
It's a big part of it. And, they've kind of gone, well, I mean, these things always fluctuate. And that's kind of the thing. Like, particularly with how I tend to look at things, like you can look at it and be like, wow, they were really unlucky with turnovers this year. And that's fine. It's just going to happen sometimes.
Well, their fumble numbers are incredible. They lose more than they should. And I think they recovered like 2 of like 12 fumbles that they forced as a defense last year. Like their fumble numbers they're so unlucky with it.
Yeah, it's insane. But part of the thing with looking at those pieces of it that are random, like you can look at it and be like, well, yeah, you got really unlucky here. But if you accept that it's random, you're just waiting for it to change. Like there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, Adrian could have the same amount of fumbles per, one fumble every 7 carries in 2021. But if you recover 90% of them, nobody cares and you probably win more games. And It's just, it is what it is. And that's, it gets into big picture stuff, but like really having continued success is being able to kind of minimize those pieces of it. And Nebraska still seems really far away from that. Like 2021 success, it might come down to just be like, yeah, we got a little bit fortunate on some of those bounces, and it gave us momentum, it gave us confidence, and maybe now we're off and running.
Yeah.
But again, you're just hoping.
Yeah. And like, I wonder, to kind of bring this back to the quarterback competition, I wonder if the commitment to Adrian is, like a little bit of, we kind of just have to live with this because his highs are really high. When he's still got a lot of potential to be a playmaking quarterback and a guy that can make big plays at key moments. And so I guess, if you're talking about can Logan unseat him, it's really a matter of can you be a bigger playmaker, maybe with a similar penchant for mistakes, or can you have a much higher floor? And with a young guy, that might be too much to ask, having a much higher floor. So, and like, this is what you said, can he just make throws that you're like, nobody else on our team can make that throw?
Yeah.
So spring ball will be super interesting in that regard.
Yeah. Would you, since we're into February now, when you think of the 2020 season, in terms of games, what's the first thing you think of?
What do you mean? As far as what? When I think of games?
Just when you're like when it comes to like, oh yeah, in 2020, Nebraska football was about this. This is what I remember about Nebraska football.
Promising, but maddening.
Okay. If you were to put that into a game, which game is that?
Put it into a game. Can I put it into 2 games? Like a 2-game stretch?
Yeah.
Like Rutgers and Minnesota.
Okay. Interesting. Because I feel like, and it is just a feeling. I feel like most people remember 2020 based on the Illinois game, which was bad. Like, unforgivable. Like, you've got to be better than that. Like, this team kind of has a annoying tendency to not deal with, hey, you just beat Penn State, a game that everyone, realistically chalked up as a loss when the schedule came out. And it was unquestionably the low point of the season. In Minnesota, Minnesota was a lot better than Illinois, but Minnesota not far behind because it felt like Nebraska was like, oh, maybe they end with some momentum. Like, I think the truer, well, I don't know if it's truer. Like, you could also look at 2020 as a year where Nebraska really played well against Northwestern and really played well against Iowa. And I think both those teams were really good. And we're used to them being good, and we're used to them being good in their own like annoying, slow football ways. But last year's Iowa team was maybe it's probably the best that I think I remember since covering Big Ten football. Yes, even better than the team that went all the way to the Big Ten championship game undefeated and then lost there. Northwestern, not so sure about, but still really good, and an elite defense, which you can just kind of lock in with them. So
I thought they had one of the best defenses in the country.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely did. And they had one of the best defenses in the country when you really broke it down. A year ago, they just had no offense, and they got like the basic level of offense they needed to kind of walk away with the Big Ten West division. And Nebraska played well against those, and it doesn't excuse the Illinois loss. It's just interesting as I get a little further removed from 2020, as I think about it. It's like, what do you remember from that? Is it more the Illinois game, or is it more Northwestern Iowa? And for you, you mentioned the 2-game swing, which is interesting because it kind of displayed both parts of what that was.
Yeah.
Of Minnesota and then Rutgers. So
I tend to view the Illinois game as a blip, which is probably giving them too much of the benefit of the doubt. But like, if you talk about it from a defensive standpoint, that game was just, they have 6 games if you take out Ohio State, where they played good to really good football. And then they had the Illinois game where they just played not good football defensively. And I think the 6 games where they were good to really good is more indicative of where they are. So like the Illinois game was like inexcusable because you're trying to build momentum and you don't want to have like a big win against Penn State and then just completely fall in your face. But at the same time, it seemed like it wasn't really representative of what they were. I have a question for you. And we can wrap this up on this point. If they opened the season with Northwestern, played the same schedule through, had the Iowa game, Purdue, Minnesota, and they have the win against Rutgers, but they closed the season with Ohio State. And it's the exact same Ohio State game that happened in week 1. Like Nebraska looks like surprisingly good in the first half and like is like taking it to Ohio State a little bit at the line of scrimmage. Does that change the outlook of the team? Do you think people have forgotten about what they look like against Ohio State?
So none of the results change. We're just bumping Ohio State from the first game to the last game.
Yeah, we're just picking it up, plucking it out, and putting it at the end, which I know doesn't work because that was the +1 Big Ten game. They wouldn't have played Ohio State, but like just for the sake of this argument, you're just plucking the game out and putting it at the end of the line instead of the front of the line.
Yeah. It probably goes a little bit better. So in that scenario, Nebraska starts 1-4, and then splits over the second half, which part of that would be like looking like you're going to hang with Ohio State for a half. And then Ohio State goes on to win the Big Ten and play for the college football national title. Yeah, it probably helps a little bit. I don't know if it helps a ton, but it helps a little bit, I think. But I mean, it's interesting because that Ohio State game, because it was the first game, and because we all thought Ohio State was a national title caliber team, which they ended up being, just didn't quite get there. You're kind of like, yeah, we'll just try and take some good from this. So it'd be interesting to move that to the end of the season. I mean, talking about the blip that Illinois may have been, particularly on defense, only 2 teams scored more than 30 points against Nebraska, and it was Ohio State and Illinois, which I hadn't looked at previously, but is pretty interesting. So 28 points is like dead average for college football. And it's like if Nebraska hovers around 28 points defensively, for me, that's the defense doing its job.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Okay, we are over an hour, so we can probably wrap this up, and I'll let you get on with your Thursday afternoon. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Brandon.
Thank you.
Make sure you are reading HailVarsity.com, subscribed to Hail Varsity, subscribed to all of the podcast offerings that we have as a proud part of the Hurrdat Media Network. Brandon's podcast is great. Even though it's not going right now, the IA Preview podcast should be something that you're subscribed to, should be something that you're listening to in season. We've got a bunch of others. We've got really something for every day of the week. So shouts to Sasha for producing this. She's got her own podcast with Aaron Sorensen. Shouts to you guys for listening each week and for listening to everything that we offer at Hail Varsity. Remember, if you haven't already, go leave a 5-star review. If you leave a 4-star review or a 3-star or 2-star, even, God forbid, a 1-star review, I will find you. I will track down your email address, and I will spam your inbox with clips from the Scott's Tots episode of The Office. Be safe. Talk to you guys next week.
A Hurrdat Media Production.